Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Social Anxiety Life. This week we're going to talk about anxiety around the workplace. Would you like to start us off, Simon?
Yeah, when I think about work and the workplace, I think the thing for me is obviously if you go into the workplace, you've got you've got to have some kind of interaction with the people that you work with. And depending on what sort of work you have or doing, whether it's an office, whether it's in a shop or whatever, I think for me, my experiences of anxiety in the workplace are not necessarily linked to the actual work itself, because I think that the job that I do, I'm good at. I know that I'm doing the right thing. I know that things are good. It's those times within the workplace where you've either you're collaborating with someone on a project, or you're going to a meeting, or you've been asked to go to a meeting, or something like lunch, like someone says, like, do you want to come out for lunch? And you feel like if you say no, if you come across as rude, or you come across as unfriendly, when actually that's not the case.
No, I would agree with that. I don't get anxiety with regards to my actual job. I'm quite confident in what I'm doing. I know I'm good at it. I think for me, there's two aspects to the anxiety. One is when I have to sort of publicly speak. That's something I've always found quite difficult. I think I've found it easier as I've got older, but it still does create anxiety if I know I have to stand in front of a room of adults and speak. And then the other side where I struggle a little bit is around kind of work events. So any kind of social work things, maybe at the end of a day or at the end of a term, those for me at times can be a little bit of a struggle.
Coming back to sort of publicly speaking, so do you get the anxiety before it happens?
Yeah.
Because I think sort of my definition of anxiety would be it's things that haven't happened yet. It's things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
And I find the same that when you got to deliver a staff meeting, or you got to deliver a presentation, or you've got to have a meeting or whatever, I think the process of preparing for it is fine. It's then when you've got to do it, it's all those sort of it's almost those sort of social etiquette things like, am I making myself understood? What are they thinking as I'm speaking? Am I coming across really well? What happens if I fluff something up? What happens if I say something wrong? That's where I get a little bit muddled. I know that when it comes to something like an interview, a work interview, sometimes I will say, can I come back to that, just to buy myself a bit of thinking time?
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, because sometimes I think in the moment you panic a bit, don't you? So that's quite a good idea, actually, to say, can I come back to that? Because then you're giving yourself a bit of breathing space. Yeah, I think when it comes to the public speaking in front of adults, like I remember being at school, being sort of 13, 14 and having to do presentations in front of my class. And I remember back then I would get so anxious about it. Like I would get so worried before I did it, and I'd be sort of quite shaky. My voice would be shaking. And I think it goes back to that. I definitely find it less anxiety inducing now, but it's always been something that I've slightly struggled with.
Yeah, I found the same at school. I struggled a lot at school with when you're having like class discussion, or you've been asked to contribute. I didn't really engage very much with that, and then you're perceived then as, like we've talked about this before, you're perceived as like shy, quiet, reserved, introverted, unfriendly, rude, etc. When actually, I think particularly for me, when I've hit my 40s, I think I've realised actually there's nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not.
I think I struggle particularly, I'm trying to think of something about work where it feels sometimes like when it gets to sort of social events, I feel almost like I'm on the edge of the social circle. I'm not in the social circle. So that, say for example, it's Friday, there's a message go around saying like pub club's going to happen today. We're going to this place. In the past, I've gone,
Yeah.
but then I've looked at it and then tried to work out. I've gone to the pub, but it's all the preparation you do before you get there.
Yeah.
You're looking at like who do you go in with, preferably someone that you're comfortable with, who's already there, and then it comes to like the conversation. That's the bit I find the most difficult. Whether if it's work conversation, I'm usually okay. But then when it sort of delves into small talk, you're sort of asking like, oh, you're talking about the weather, you're talking about where you've been, you're talking about what you're doing at the weekend. I'm thinking what's someone said already. How can I follow on from that? And sometimes that's when I go quite reserved. What would come across as quite reserved, but actually it's not. I just can't think of anything to say.
Yeah. No, I have that as well, where I find it really easy to talk about work. I think we both do. That's like quite an easy conversation to have. But when it goes into the more personal conversations, as you said, you sit there and you're thinking about, right, what can I say? How can I contribute? What questions can I ask? And sometimes you find that your mind is going and you're not saying a lot, and then you kind of fall a bit behind with the conversation. And then sometimes that makes you feel, a little bit anxious, or it just makes you feel a bit overly sort of self-aware.
I know, I'm thinking about sort of like lunchtime and breaks and things. Usually I take a walk at lunchtime and just go out.
Yeah.
Particularly if I'm visiting a new workplace. And I always think like if you have an hour for lunch, 45 minutes to an hour for lunch, I go out for a walk, which I think is good for well-being anyway. If I have lunch with me, I'll take it with me. And if there's a park or something nearby, I'll just go and sit in the park. And that's sort of, I don't know if that's just sort of transferring or just blocking out whatever the issue is. But it certainly makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Because I'm in control of what I'm doing. And I think it's almost that sort of social aspect. You can, I suppose, in some workplaces you can dip in and out.
Yeah.
If you choose to work at lunch, like I know that sometimes we would work through lunchtime doing particular jobs, which means that we don't have to stay later after a certain time. So I don't know whether that is the case. Whether there are people who feel as though like they have to do the social stuff at work rather than being brave and saying that they don't want to do it.
Yeah, because I think maybe people might feel a bit bad if they are avoiding those social situations. Like you said, you take yourself out for a walk, but I'll quite often stay in my classroom at lunchtime. Not all the time, but I will stay in my classroom. And that's for two reasons. One, because I like to work and I like to get things done so I can go home earlier. But also maybe there is a slight avoidance there. But then if that's what's best for my well-being, then as you said, there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes you need to do what helps you, and if that's maybe at times avoiding those social situations, there's nothing wrong with that.
I think then that leads into what the other people or other person's perception is, and I think sometimes maybe it's a lack of understanding.
Yeah,
because I've worked with some people who get it.
Oh, absolutely.
Who I say, right, I'm gonna have lunch here today, or I'm gonna go out to the shop for a little bit, and there's no question about it. But there's some people who don't get the joy of being on your own.
Yeah.
Because you can collect your own thoughts, you can reflect on how the morning's gone. If you're feeling a little bit maybe dysregulated yourself, then it gives you just a chance to sort of get yourself more centered, as it were. And I don't think we should be afraid of saying it or doing it.
Absolutely. Do you feel that over the years has your anxiety around work changed much, or do you just think you found maybe different ways of coping with it?
I think when it comes to things like we were talking about presentations earlier, I end up doing it, and I feel, as time's gone on, I feel more confident doing it. But there are times where I'm presenting and I lose my train of thought.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about something and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a good point. I'm coming across really well. And then suddenly I reach a block.
Yeah.
And that's when I start to get, I feel a little bit embarrassed even that I'm having to say it. So I try at that point to look at try and pick out a person for reassurance. Because sometimes also my eye contact goes a little bit all over the place.
Yeah.
As well, because when I'm presenting, I don't like making direct eye contact. But when I sort of fluff my lines or fluff what I'm saying, I sort of look all over the place, think, oh no, I've made a mistake now. That person must think I'm really silly. Yeah, that's when it kicks. That's when it kicks in. It doesn't happen as much now, but I remember when I first started working, there was sort of the thought of being told, oh, you got to do a meeting now, you've got to do this. It filled me with dread.
Yeah.
But when I sort of start methodically going through, right, this is what I'm doing, this is how it's going to be, and usually ends up being okay. So actually, on reflection, there was no need to be anxious in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's still hard.
Oh, yeah. I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where the more you do something, the easier it gets. So like with public speaking, I think the more you do it, the less anxious you become about it. Not to say that the anxiety is not there, but you just find ways of coping, and you come to that realization with something like public speaking where, okay, if I actually make a mistake, no one is going to care, because that is what a lot of it is, isn't it? It's the overthinking of what are people going to think about me? How am I going to come across? And you've got to realize, that people don't judge you in that way. And actually, standing up and speaking in front of people is quite an achievement, really. And sometimes it's about being proud of those small moments and those small achievements.
How do you feel about when you have meetings at work?
Yeah.
If there's an unexpected meeting.
Yes.
So if someone asks you for an unexpected meeting, because I like to, at the start of the day, I like to sort of plan out what I'm doing. So like today I had my notebook, I had all my things out that I needed to do, sort of planned, sort of my blocks of work and planned my lunch in, and then everything else sort of fell into place. But when someone wants a meeting about something, and it's not clear what it is, what it's about, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me from sort of a routine point of view, but I'm very much a person, if you're going to email me, I like to know what it's about, because if I get an email that says, right, please, you need to see me at 4:00, immediately I have a tendency to think, oh my goodness, have I done something wrong? What's this about? And I do tend to go to maybe worst case scenario rather than just thinking, oh, it's probably just a normal conversation, or it could even be a positive conversation. I don't know if you're the same.
Yeah, I find that sometimes it's like a phone call, for example. Sometimes when people phone me, sometimes I just don't answer it.
Right.
Especially if it's an unknown number.
Oh yeah, I don't.
It's unknown number. Sometimes if it's a friend, then usually I will answer. But I always think beforehand, why are they phoning? Especially if I'm in the middle of something. If I'm sort of watching something or doing something, someone phones. If I'm engrossed in what I'm doing, then I'll leave it, and I'll message them to say I'll phone you back later. But even like talking on the phone sometimes, it feels a bit. It feels a bit hard, difficult, even. But like with work stuff as well, I think sort of in the event of like WhatsApp and like other social media for communicating, I think that's slightly better now, because people just message and do all that now.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that sort of in-person stuff that sometimes I know you have to have, which I know I'm definitely better at, but I don't think people see the processes that I go through before that even happens.
Yeah, well, people don't see the overthinking that happens before something like a meeting or a presentation.
That's right. Well, I think this has been a really good in-depth discussion about the workplace. I think we'll be very interested to hear what any of our listeners have think about work, and whether they have anything similar to what we've had. If you have, then I think you should drop us a little line on the Facebook group.
Oh, absolutely. We would love to hear your experiences, your thoughts on the episode, any feedback you've got for us.
And episode 4 and episode 5, I believe we're going to try and do that as one on the same topic, but we're going to do that in 2 episodes. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're going to sort of film one long episode and then break it into 2 parts for you.
And I believe we're going to talk about social events, more general social events.
Yeah, and we've got a lot to say on that.
We have. Thank you so much for listening to episode 3.
Thank you.